All right, my name is Keith Austin. This is CONVO-19. I have very special guests with me. Marie Mott, how would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Marie Mott, community activist, organizer, city council candidate, and Chattanooga native.
All right, perfect. Now today, besides having you on, I wanted to have my friend Rodney on. He actually was at the protest with you guys. Was it the other night or when was it, Rodney?
I went Friday night and it was super fun. Everybody was super peaceful.
Mm-hmm. All right, it's perfect.
Great time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, before we go any further, I do want to say thank you for everything you've been doing for the community. I understand for some of us it may be a little different than others, but I do appreciate everything you've been doing for everybody in Chattanooga. There's not many people that would do what you are doing, and that definitely shows the kind of person that you are and what you are trying to achieve. So I want to thank you for that.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right. Now, for anyone that don't know, she's actually been one of the main voices of the protest in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, explain to the people, or us in general, because we might see it differently and might think of it differently as others. How did this start in Chattanooga?
Well, I mean, it started with us standing in solidarity with those in Minneapolis and all across the nation that responded in necessary uprisings against what is happening all across the country, and that is that Black bodies are being harmed, whether that is through police brutality, but often even in death, that we are being killed unwarranted. And so we wanted to stand in solidarity because those issues have happened right here in Chattanooga, and it's time for the people to rise up.
All right. So how many days in a row have you been protesting?
Today, this evening at 6 p.m., we're going to be at Miller Park. This will be day 9. So we've been doing this for a week and a half.
Okay.
And listen, you guys, hold on. I went one night. It was Friday night, and I started at Miller Park, and we went all the way to Riverfront. And then we ended, I feel like we looped around 100 times. They have been going for 8 days straight. Respect to y'all, because that shit is tiring. People don't even know.
That's right. So you guys started, it's been you said your 9th day or your 8th day in a row today?
Today will be the 9th day in a row after tonight.
Okay. So my main question I want to ask is, what do people assume when they get there? Like, do they expect it to be just a protest march around, or do you guys have an agenda that you try to do when you're there?
So, the agenda pretty much is always the same, with the amount of resources that we are bringing in changing. And so the agenda is to speak to the space and the people in the space and to get them excited about this is just the first step. Protesting is just to highlight an issue. The next phase after a protest is to get tangibles for the reasons in which you protested, meaning some results for your protest and change. And so starting to articulate what we are demanding as outcomes of these protests as far as change is concerned locally. That's what we do in the space, and then we march at the end.
Okay. Now, before we go any further about the Chattanooga protests and everything, I wanted to know a little bit more about you. What started your process of wanting to become part of these protests? What started your idea of wanting to be part of the city council in some degree? I just want to know more about you as a person.
What started was, it was just how I was raised. So I was raised by my grandmothers. My grandfather died when my father was 16 years old.
Okay.
So he actually had a legacy that he left in Chattanooga. My grandfather, Thomas Leon Mott Sr., was a community advocate and organizer in Orchard Knob and was actually fighting for affordable housing in the late 60s and 70s, and actually created programs that taught inner city Black youth how to build homes, because he came from the Bahamas. Okay. And that's actually your rites of passage in the Bahamas, is you learn how to build a home. So he built several homes that generated wealth for my grandmother that actually took care of her after he died. So it's a really a family thing, serving community. I just started stepping up in my late 20s because I had done the corporate America thing, the kind of get in the bag thing, but was really seeing a lot of issues that we talked about nationally happening in Chattanooga, and them not being taken care of in a grand sense, that young people were engaging and trying to shift the conversation of how we change Chattanooga. And so I just wanted to step up and start doing that. And so that's kind of how it all, how we got here, is this stepping up. And then as I started meeting people in the community and them seeing my platform, what I stand for, that has opened up a door to make relationships with so many different people in the community. And I appreciate that.
That's awesome. All right. So another question I want to have is, have you seen any changes in Chattanooga in the recent years since you've been a part of the scene?
Oh yeah, I've seen changes. Who they benefit is the question.
Yeah.
Chattanooga has such a potential to be an equitable city for all and to really set an example for the rest of the country. And if you actually look into Chattanooga history, we have done that in various different levels. Dr. Martin Luther King had an opportunity to preach in Chattanooga before he became a pastor anywhere else at Ebenezer. So we are a very historical city, but what we have seen in recent years is that for at least for my community and the African American community, a lot of us are being displaced out of our communities because of the excessive cost of housing, that we are seeing wage stagnation. Here in Chattanooga, we are seeing, like what's going on in the Volkswagen plant, a deterrent of people organizing even on the job to be able to get a better pay and better benefits. So we see a lot of nice projects and nice stuff and condominiums and different things like that. But the things that need to happen for people who have been here and for a lot of people who are locked out from an access perspective, I have not seen change for them.
Okay. Do you have any questions, Rodney?
No.
All right. I didn't know if you were soaking in all of this and had any questions of your own that you may want to ask her about. This is one of the few times we might actually get in touch with her and have these questions answered. You know what I mean?
Well, I was going to save this for later, but so how long do you guys plan to march continuously? Like, is there a plan? Is there a certain thing you're looking for that's like, okay, we'll give you your streets back, whatever is there a certain thing you're looking for or a certain meeting you're waiting to have?
Yes and yes. So we are looking to have our demands met, and those demands are first divestment from the police budget and reinvesting that into Black and Brown communities in the form of our youth and family development and public transit through CARTA. And then 2 changes to policy, that is the duty to intervene and warning before shooting policies. So we're going to our plan is to hit the budget because our budget is very lopsided here in the city of Chattanooga. We invest a lot into police and we do not really invest in young people and future generations. And certainly our public transit is absolutely behind for us to be a tourist city. And that has an impact to how certain populations get back and forth to work or to the grocery store, to the pharmacy. So being able to expand that through investment is also imperative. So we have those demands, and then we have the expectation that we're going to sit down. All of the activist groups that started these protests have come into alignment with one another. And we are going to be sitting down in a meeting very, very soon with our elected officials to place these demands in front of them and to either get a commitment. And then depending on that, that's going to have an effect on what our next steps are. So as long as the people show up, and then depending on what the outcome is going to be about what our leadership is going to do as far as change in Chattanooga, it depends on how long this can go. But if we look at civil rights, from a historical perspective, we had ancestors and grandparents of ours that boycotted buses for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
So this to be determined by many factors.
Basically, find it one day at a time. I got you.
And when you talked about de-investing in police, last night I was watching C. Grimey's live, and at the very end, it looked like they brought out the riot crew over supposedly 2 light poles. What kind of money, and it looked completely unnecessary. What kind of money was wasted on that? Do you have any idea?
I don't know how much money was wasted on that, but I mean, I could tell you for this year's budget for the city of Chattanooga, we're going to be handing the police department $71.8 million.
And
So
what does that go into?
The majority of that, about almost 29 million of that, is going towards what they define as safer streets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means besides their presence in our community, but $30 million is going for them basically to just sit in our community and I guess find people to arrest.
Mm-hmm. I see that.
So basically they want to move from a 2019 car to a 2020 car to sit on the street.
Your guess is as good as mine because defining safer streets, I don't know what that means, but I know what the outcome is, and that's heavy police in our communities generally harassing or arresting or harming people.
How has the police been treating you guys at the protest?
So it depends on which police you're talking about. So
well, we can talk about the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, and we can talk about the actual Chattanooga City Police. We can go from each side and go from there.
Okay, so we were tear gassed.
Mm-hmm.
Unarmed people
Yep.
were tear gassed on Pentecost Sunday by our Hamilton County sheriffs. Mm-hmm. While the Chattanooga Police Department stood by. So we have had CPD who have hit people with batons. We've had CPD that have just arrested people for stepping off the curb. Mm-hmm. CPD has not deterred any violence towards us. We had a white male vigilante that came into our march with a rifle mm-hmm. and held it at a LGBTQIA couple with their children. And we had to notify the police that he was there. Okay. And that's even with them having presence at our marches and drones at our marches. They missed a guy with a rifle. Mm-hmm. And then just 2 days ago, we had a protester that was hit by a car that drove right past the police. Yeah. So to me, all this does is just gives credence to what we're talking about. We're paying these people to not help us, to not serve us, to not protect us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to your point, when I was there Friday, me and my girlfriend, it was a crazy crowd. I mean, you couldn't see from the front to the back. I mean, it was a sea of people flowing through the streets. We were towards the middle, and I wouldn't have even noticed it if my girlfriend didn't see it. And when we were walking by the, I don't know what the building's called, but it's where they do the inside rock climbing and all the lights are lit up. And mm-hmm. she looked up and she was like, "Hey, there's some cops standing up there just looking down at us." And to your point, how can they have the officers on top of the buildings watching us like we're a terrorist group when we're peacefully protesting? But they didn't notice an armed white man sitting on top of another building with an arsenal of weapons. He didn't just have a handgun. He had rifles, handguns. He had everything.
He had an AK-7.
Yeah. And we also, I noticed I know a lot of people said they saw 2 drones. I saw 3 drones following us that night. So I don't understand how they're missing this guy sitting on top of the buildings claiming he's mad about the protesting, also under the influence. Mm. And from what I hear, I don't know how true this is, but from what I hear, the protesters noticed him before the police supposedly noticed him.
Right. So we have marshals. We have actual security for our marches to be able to communicate if there is a potential issue, because safety of the protesters is paramount to us. Mm. So they communicated what was going on before people who we're paying, and they're probably charging us a tremendous amount of money for this, for for their inadequate security of our protests. We noticed that before they were even aware.
Okay, so you actually said that you had marshals for the protest. Now, tell me, what all exactly do you guys bring for the protest? You have like certain, let's say, supplies that you have for your marches, and what people do you have that kind of help work and help make sure the protests and all these marches go by peacefully?
Absolutely. So as activists and organizers, a lot of us, this is not our first rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
So we are experienced in medical training. So how to help people if they've been shot, if they've been stabbed. So we have medical supplies. We have Gatorade and water to make sure people are hydrated, because this is the South and it's hot and humid.
Yeah. Exactly.
We have people that we assign for our disabled protesters to be able to push their wheelchairs and make sure that they are looked after the entirety of the march if they participate. We just collected information to be able to communicate with folks for the long term. We have set up an Instagram to be able to continue with messaging and communication. We have, of course, we have our own security. So the security are the ones that are watching, that are basically watching the protesters front, middle, and rear to look out for any potential threats. And then we have marshals front and rear that are on bikes that are basically leading maybe a quarter of a mile in front of our protesting group to be able to shut down intersection and make sure that nobody gets hit by a car or different things like that, and communicate as we change directions. So we are extremely organized and detailed in our approach from a safety perspective, from a health perspective, and just making sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Okay, you said something about an Instagram earlier. Can you want to shout out the Instagram page's name so people can follow?
I not know the page's name because the young people set it up, but
okay, gotcha.
I will send that to you guys to be able to put out whenever you feel like.
Okay.
When I was there, I actually saw, and I don't know her name, I don't know anything about her, but it seemed like every intersection we would get to and we would stop and have like a brief talking, there was this one certain SUV that was there, and they had just a trunk full of water. But it seemed like every single time we got to a different intersection, she was there and ready, and that was crazy. I mean, that was great. I was actually surprised, and I thought it was beautiful that most of the time when we came up on cars that were going places, they were like, "Hey, we're not in a hurry." They were all in support. So I was proud to see that.
Yes, so we have folks who have volunteered for different places within our route to just wait in their cars to be able to hand out water and Gatorade and popsicles to people as we have hydration needs along the route. So we are there not to just scream and protest and yell, but we're going to make sure that we take care of the people while they're with us and entrusting us with their safety.
Okay.
There were also people there with all types of medical gear and everything. I mean, it was, if anything was going to go wrong, there were people there that were going to help you.
Exactly.
So, from the first day of protesting to let's say last night, how much bigger has the crowd gotten?
Oh my goodness, we maybe started the first protest with 100 folks, and so what's today? Sunday. On Saturday, we had two different groups. So it's Concerned Citizens for Justice and I Can't Breathe Cha came together for a massive group that had to be anywhere between 900 to 1,000 people.
That's ridiculous. That's crazy.
On Friday, I heard C. Grimey said that he got the numbers back, and he said there were around 800 people Friday night. And I keep up with his live every single day. And since the beginning, it seems like it has increased daily.
Yep. So, I mean, last night we had over 500 people before we even started marching.
Mm-hmm. Is it, do you have a hard time when you have that many people involved in one activity like this?
Absolutely not. We planned for this.
Okay.
Like I said, a lot of us have protested with the death of Eric Garner, Mike Brown. So we've done it before. We've done this on a massive scale before. So this is not anything new to us. The only thing you do is just multiply the people that are out front, out back, that are watching out. And because we are all in alignment with one another, we communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and from my firsthand experience, it seemed like you were always near the front of the lines, and every time we would come to an intersection, you would be up there, and y'all would have the megaphones and stuff. And I mean, everybody was just cooperating and moving as one unit, and it was just working flawlessly. Anytime we would come across a barricade of cops or anything, we'd say our piece and we'd move along.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was one unit and moving as one.
That's awesome. All right, now this one might be a little different. Well, I don't want to say different. This question might be a little controversial, depending on who asks and who wants it. I guess listening. So someone like with me and Rodney, we're clearly white people. When some people see us, they definitely use the term white privilege, which I definitely believe white privilege is 100% a real thing. And I have a story on why I believe it's a real thing, and some white people have a hard time understanding and seeing it. But before I get into that story, I want to know, do you have any issues with certain white people that are there that probably they don't necessarily believe in the reason, they just want to be out there and say they're there for social media?
I mean, we had one day of protest where a young white man thought that it was appropriate to play the actual audio to George Floyd being deceased or being murdered. Okay. And so quickly shut that down. Mm-hmm. And set a boundary that the space really is for our white brothers and sisters to come out in support. Mm-hmm. This is the moment where Black people need to be able to speak our truth and our pain, and not just only our frustration. So it's clear that it's coming from us because this is our experience, and that we want you to understand. Right? We want you to understand and get an understanding of what we're going through, and encourage you that there is something that you can do about it. Mm-hmm. So there's only been that one instance because I will say that most white people come into this space with respect. Mm-hmm. So there hasn't been any major issues with anybody on that note, for real.
Now, there was one thing that I saw, and I'm really questioning it because I don't know what happened or what was the meaning behind it. There was a last night on C. Grimey's live, there was a older white guy, and I saw him Friday, but last night he was walking up and saying, he was an older white guy, he was in a gray suit, and he had a megaphone, and he was talking to C. Grimey, and C. Grimey was like, "No, we're not doing that here," but I don't understand what happened because that's all I heard. Do you have any idea what that was?
We've had a few provocateurs that have come, which is natural when you're talking about things that impact a specific community like the Black community. We expect there to be provocateurs that come out to try to derail the conversation and make it seem like, well, this is not really an issue, or this is not how you handle it, and nobody has a right to tell us how to deal with our pain, and certainly nobody has a right to tell us how we get to handle these situations and bring about change. Nobody has that right. But we've had a few provocateurs. A lot of them have been Christian provocateurs who have come out and handed out pamphlets about going to heaven, which I don't know what that has to do about right now. And spouting out Bible verses, which has nothing to do with the issue of human life and the particular disproportionate effects of policing in Black and brown communities. Scripture has nothing to do with that. So that's generally, we've had one guy that showed up consistently with the megaphone and his big old sign, but we always have, again, we have folks trained in the protest that immediately respond to folks like that to shut them down.
That's good. I actually come from a very small town outside Chattanooga called Dunlap, Tennessee. And this situation has really shown people's true colors and really on how racism really has been around my whole entire life. And seeing all these people that I considered friends and even family saying all this stuff and want to shout out like Blue Lives Matter, which I have a whole argument against that. I'm not going to try to get too deep into that because I want to hear what you say about it. But how do you, when you have a conversation with someone who's on the other side of it, how do you try to I don't want to say justify, because justify sounds wrong. How do you try to clear up what you're doing and why you're doing the right thing, if you understand what I'm saying?
So I don't think Black people necessarily have a responsibility at this point to try to educate white people on what's going on. I mean, if you pick up a book, there are books I can recommend for that.
Okay.
There are whole sociologists for that because I'm an intellectual.
Okay.
So Abraham Kendi, Stamped from the Beginning, They Were Her Property, that talks about white women that were slave holders because it wasn't just white men. There are so many books out there. One of my favorites right here, which is The Color of Law, which talks about segregation and how it was instituted by the American government. It wasn't a Black person that wrote that. So there's so much information out there. It's really the responsibility of other white people that understand what we're going through, that identify with what we're going through, that have come to grips with American history in its true context, and understand the institution of white supremacy, that it comes with certain benefits, that it started off the plantation, that it's your responsibility to dismantle that because Black people didn't create capitalism, nor did they create slavery. Not to sound disrespectful, but in a lot of instances, white people don't come into my frame of thought. My and foremost purpose in life is to ensure that I advocate for resources in the very community that I was raised in. And so that community is predominantly African American, that is lacking a tremendous amount of resources. And, you know, white people need to understand that even when we're talking about police brutality, even though we're affected by it disproportionately, white people are killed unarmed by police. We just had a young man that was killed in Sell Creek, young white male in his early 20s, shot in the back in Sell Creek by our Hamilton County sheriffs in his parents' front yard. My Lord, if that don't show you that you ain't exempt from this, it's just, it happens to us disproportionately. But that's your responsibility. You know,
right. You're right.
And it's hard. I know it's probably hard for you because you're like, good God, what? Why can't my parents or my family or certain people just see what's going on? You know, and if we fix it, we don't have to keep having these conversations.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of goes from my story of why I believe white privilege is a real thing. So definitely when we're younger, we are not necessarily taught of how tough certain people of color or different, like, you know, backgrounds have it. So I remember in one instance, me and Rodney used to shoot music videos for these people in Murfreesboro. And one time I drove up there, it was just me, and I'll never forget these guys' names. It was Shaquan Mace and Ty Anthony. They were some of the great people that used to let me stay with them in Murfreesboro. And it was probably one of the first few times that I spent, like, I'd say about a good week with Black people. And I remember we were driving somewhere. I was in the back seat, and they got pulled over. And the guy, you know, knocked on the window and was like, license, registration, and everything I thought was fine. Then the cop comes to me, knocks on my window. I roll the window down, and he asked me, "Are you okay?" I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand the situation. So I'm like, of course, I mean, I'm fine. I'm good. And then he sat there and talked to me. He says, well, you know, if you need any problem, if you have any problems or anything, let me know. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what was going on. And then as he lets us go and we're driving away, they're looking at me like, I can't believe that happened. I'm like, I don't understand what happened. And then ever since then, that's when I realized white privilege was a thing.
Absolutely, because automatically, if you're a white man rolling with two Black gentlemen, we're kidnapping you.
Well, it was actually three. I just cannot remember the other guy's name because it was one of their other friends that I met that day, but I can't remember his name for the life of me.
We're kidnapping you, surely. And the kind of sentiment that you get from that is, surely this young white man is not hanging with these Black boys.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. He was more worried about my safety than worrying about whatever they were or weren't doing, which they weren't doing nothing. They were just driving down the road. And not to mention, it was an undercover police car, not even like a stereotypical undercover police car like something like Tahoe or SUV or anything. It was like some little Honda. And they came out of nowhere.
The problem that I'm from the same town that Austin's from, even though it's just miles away from Chattanooga and it's right over the mountain. it's just a completely different world. Like I saw this picture on Facebook, and I posted it, and it was talking about how police departments need to have a better hiring process. They need to go through more schooling and stuff.
They do.
And I said, I commented on it when I shared it. I said, it feels like and this is true from where we come from, most police departments these days feel like mom and pop shops, because it's like all these family members and friends, they just join the force. Well, the problem that our town has is that people have never got outside of that area and really seen things happen in the world away from them. And it's like, I just don't understand how they just can't comprehend that there's something wrong with the way that things are going right now.
There's definitely a lot of closet racism going on where we're coming from, but we're not here to really talk about our small town because honestly, right now, it kind of sounds like we're just talking about on how I don't understand how we are so much better and understand like there is such thing as racism going on in the world, because that's not exactly what I'm trying to do. I don't know if I told you this, but I think when I messaged you and asked you to come on the show, I wanted you to come on because I felt like a majority of my listeners and the people I know that watch the show are white people, and they just don't understand. And I even said on a post the other day that I will never fully understand the situation, but I am at least trying to do something.
Absolutely. And the reason why we are separated is intentional. There is a period in American history called Bacon's Rebellion, which happened after the first slaves were brought here in 1619. And what happened is there was an uprising and a unification of white indentured servants and slaves. And we came together as a unified front, and we went against the elite in Jamestown and burnt a city to the ground. And ever since then, there has been an intentional divide that has been wedged between the Black and the white community. And it's not because when I look at, because I'm an intellectual, when I look at census data, when I look at education data, I mean, for the state of Tennessee, there are more rural hospitals closing than in the inner city. I'm better off getting shot in Chattanooga than I would be getting shot somewhere in rural Tennessee, because the nearest hospital may be 2 or 3 hours away. So you guys are going through the exact same things that we're going through. And the divide is to keep us, because of white privilege. The white privilege is the blinders that keeps white people from understanding that you guys are really going through the exact same thing. And you have more to benefit coming into alignment with Black people than you ever would going against them. But again, a lot of that misunderstanding. I believe that a lot of white people don't intentionally want to be racist. You said it just a few minutes ago. There's a lack of understanding because there are people who have never gone outside of their community. If your community is all white, that's your whole perspective for life. Yeah. So you don't know what it's like to have a conversation with a Black person. You don't know what it's like to support another Black person. You don't know what it's like to go into another community and see how they receive you. So your view of the world is limited. I believe that a lot of white people are just vastly miseducated on history in its true context, and just live in communities that are still very segregated, meaning that you're either from an all white community or all Black community, and that don't really change unless you're talking about gentrification, which a lot of Black and white people can't afford. Yeah. And that's so I think it's just a misunderstanding. I don't think most white people really just want to be racist. I think they're just socialized in this society to be racist, are blind to the facts of their racism because that's all they know. Yeah. And then it's when you have a stranger like myself, who's a Black woman, saying, "Hey, man, you need to wake up and see how the world was structured for you, so you could do something about it." It's a shocker.
It really is. Yeah. I can't speak for Rodney. Oh, go ahead.
Well, like what you said, you told her, you said, you'll never know how she truly feels. You'll never be able to feel what she feels. I'll never be able to walk a day in your life, and I will never know how you feel walking through the world every day. But what I do know, and this goes for anybody that has ever been born in the world, you are born knowing right from wrong, and you were born knowing that when you treat people a certain way, that it's wrong. And if you look at what's going on in the world today, Black people are being treated wrong. And that's it. If you know right from wrong, then you know there's something going on bad right now in this world.
No, I agree. No, I can't really speak necessarily for Rodney's because I'm actually was a grade ahead of him in school, so I'm not exactly sure what he was taught. I know in history class, we was never necessarily taught about Black history that much. I mean, we were told who Martin Luther King was because he had a holiday. We knew about him, and for the life of me, I cannot remember of any other teachings whatsoever. If anything, we got taught more about World War II than anything else. But like we kind of passed over the whole age of slavery and just kind of went into basically just everything else in history.
Right. On the contrary, I do remember being taught about how slaves and just even after slavery was abolished, they would make Black people go to different restaurants. They would make Black people drink out of different water fountains and all that. I remember learning about that stuff.
Well, I kind of put that in with the whole Martin Luther King. I know it's a different time in history, but I was talking about that. That's the only thing I remember being taught. And then we kind of just graced it over.
I mean, and if you just look at between slavery and I would say the beginning of the 1900s, we had so much that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was so much in laws. We have the end of slavery because of the outcomes of the Civil War. But then you see, if you guys have you guys ever heard of Black Wall Street?
I mean, I've heard the term, but I don't know what it is, to be honest.
It was Tulsa, Oklahoma. So there was a great migration of Black people that left the South after the Civil War to go to other places to be able to create communities. And we did. Okay. And they were burned to the ground and bombed. And many people all across this country were killed. There was a period after maybe about 20 to 25 years after the Civil War of lynchings that happened all the way up until the end of the 1960s. So we had, and that is outlined by people like Ida B. Wells with the Red Record. Mm-hmm. It's so much. There's a documentary called Slavery by Another Name, which shows how if you were a Black man after the Civil War, you didn't have paperwork that proved that you had a job, they could arrest you for that and then sell you to a company and make you work off your labor, which is illegal.
Okay.
So there's so much, and that's why I say it's how we're socialized and educated in American society that perpetuates racism. I think if we understood history in its full context and what has happened to all kinds of people here, even white indentured servants have been abused in an American sense. Okay. I think if we knew that, I think it would be easier for our white brothers and sisters to understand why we're in this fight.
Okay. All right. I think we've been talking for a good little bit, and I feel like we've got a basic understanding of everything. And Rodney, is there anything you really want to ask her before you head out?
Not off the top of my head, not right now.
Okay. So before we get out of here, do you have anything you want to say? Now, remember, the majority of the people that probably watch this are going to be white. Is there anything you want to say to them about this whole situation and how maybe they can help?
Well, the first thing that I just want to say is that all we're fighting for is human dignity, decency, and respect. Mm-hmm. Regardless of who we are, it doesn't matter what color we are, we deserve to be treated with decency, respect, and have the same opportunities. We call this America, which defines that if we are citizens, we are all subject to the same rights, regardless of what we look like or how we identify. And so that's all we're fighting for. And I want my white brothers and sisters to be encouraged to understand that you really do have a lot more to benefit from learning history in its context and being supportive of Black and brown and other indigenous peoples than you ever would just being a very isolated individual and never getting to see the beauty of other languages and other people that we could expose you to. Come on over on our side and see what it's like. And I want to say thank you for joining in the protest. I really appreciate it, and having nothing but good things to say about it. We're going to keep on fighting.
Yeah, and on top of what you said, I feel like a lot of white people have just a misconception of what Black Lives Matter stand for. They have a misconception of what the protests are. This isn't just violence against the police. Black Lives Matter isn't against white people or any other race. It's just people that say blue lives matter and all lives matter. Well, they do to an extent, but you can't say all lives matter and treat people injustice. You can't treat people unfair and not like everybody else. Nothing can matter until Black Lives Matter.
Thank you.
That's true. That is 100% true. Now, you are having the protest again tonight at Miller Park. Is that correct?
At 6 o'clock. That is correct.
All right. Now, this actually probably will not be uploaded until Wednesday. What's your plan for next week? Same thing?
Plan is to keep going, and our plan is to get our meeting on the books for our demands from our representatives. So we should have some interesting conversations coming up this week, but I'm excited because we are so much closer to having some positive outcomes because of these protests.
Okay.
Are you guys planning any more visual representations? Are you going to be doing are you guys having any more events besides just the protest?
Well, we have, I was contacted by students from UTC and some high school students that have invited several of us into a space tomorrow. So we have others that are other groups and initiatives that are coming into alignment with us. We have a group of Black artists that are coming into alignment on how they can collide art with movement to be able to contextualize what we're talking about, what we are demanding, how we feel in visual art, in spoken word, in hip hop. Me and C. Grimy have created, I think, what is probably going to be the first of its kind, which is a protest playlist that has all of our local Chattanooga artists in all various forms of submitting music that we can add to our visual content. So I'm just excited that others are stepping up to join forces with us in various different lanes. And so this week, I think we're going to see this shift in an amazing direction that's going to be inclusive of other communities.
Okay.
I know when I went Friday, you guys had the people out there registering people to vote. Are they going to still be out there in the following days?
Every day they've been there to register people to vote, to help you fill out the census, because that's also important as well. And then last night we probably captured between 300 and 400 people's contact information from Twitter, from Instagram, and phone number and email. So we're going to be able to, our long-term goal is to be able to engage people in the civics process so you can become educated on how you can advocate beyond protest for what you need in your community.
Okay. And I know, I want to put this out there because I know people have the mindset of my vote doesn't count. I had the same mindset until recently. The only way we're ever going to get real change is if we get out here and vote and get the bad people out of offices. We need to clear it out. We need to put people in that actually care and are going to make real changes.
Absolutely.
Now, I do have one last question. I was going to ask earlier, but it totally slipped my mind until now. Now, with all this protesting going on, having all these people in one area, what is the worry about the disease of COVID-19?
Excellent question. So we have been intentional in making sure that part of the PPE equipment that we hand out, we've had bottles of sanitizer that we hand out every single day. We have gloves, we have masks. And then actually what we started doing for the last 2 nights is we created packets that have gloves, that have protective eyewear, that have earplugs, that have hand sanitizer, that have alcohol wipes, and then on the outside of the bag, it has a mask, and then on the outside of the bag, it has the bail number, because if you do come protest and get arrested, we're not going to let you rot in jail. We're going to get you out. So we have fully taken care of every need of the people to make sure that they're going to be safe gathering in this time. So if you don't have a mask, we have surgical masks and N95 masks to be able to hand out to you to keep you safe.
Do y'all encourage people to wear masks, or is it just whatever? Yeah.
COVID-19 is real, and it's impacting a lot of people in Hamilton County. So we want to be able to highlight the issues, but at the same time, we want to make sure that people are safe. But whether you can show up to a protest or not, that's okay. There are other ways that you can be supportive if you have underlying health conditions and want to help the activists that are doing this. We have ways you can donate to Caleb, which is our local bail fund. So you don't have to show up to be able to protest. You can protest at home by just sending $1 to our bail fund to make sure we get people bailed out that are fighting for the right thing.
All right. Make sure to send me a link to that after all this is over, and I'll make sure to put it in the bio so people can see it.
I got you.
All right. Now, do you have any? I know I said this already once before. Now, do you have any last questions you want to say, Rodney?
I know C. Grimy has a Cash App set up. I know people are helping him out, paying for lunches and et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a Cash App or a PayPal or anything set up that you would like to put out there too?
Absolutely. So my Cash App is $MMOTT88. My Venmo is @Marie MARIE Mott MOTT -2.
Okay. All right. I think this has been a really good talk, and I really appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you so much for having me, gentlemen. It has been an absolute pleasure. Keep on being great.
Thank you. Now, I really do wish you best. I wish you best, and hope all these protests still continues to stay peaceful. I know one thing: Chattanooga's getting a lot of bad rap and a lot of good rap because some people want to believe the fake news and say that it's a bunch of hoodlum activity going on downtown. But in reality, a lot of people have been giving Chattanooga a lot of props for staying peaceful.
Exactly. And that is our intent, as much as it within our power, is to be peaceable. And we're going to keep doing that. But again, I want to say thank you for inviting me onto your platform and giving me an opportunity to let people have some insight into what's going on in Chattanooga.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. I mean, you're definitely the best person asked to come on that would actually know what they're talking about and how to describe it to people like me who don't necessarily understand it completely, but I want to help as much as possible.
Thank you so much. This is what it takes.
Right before you go, you mentioned that if you can't attend the protest, there's still ways you can help out. What are some more ways that people can help out if they can't attend the protest?
Absolutely. The first thing that you can do is say a prayer for us. my Lord. Standing up for the right thing is not a convenient thing. We're exhausted. We're tired, but we're here to see it through. So say a prayer for us. And if you can, encourage us, because this ain't easy. Change isn't easy. But the second thing is that if you can't come out and protest, donate to some trusted organizations or me or C. Grimy to make sure that we provide proper PPE equipment, food, water, and other resources to people that do decide to stand with us on the right side of history. And I think the third thing is just educate yourself. Get outside of your limited world view and learn about what other people are going through and what their experience has been in an American context. And I think if you begin to do that, you might actually be shocked at some of the things you uncover. But those are all of the things that I don't have anything negative to say. I just want to encourage my white brothers and sisters to just be supportive if you can. And if you can't, at least agree that you're going to read something or look at something that's going to educate you about the Black experience.
You didn't have to be too positive. You could have said what was on your mind. We would have understood.
No. This isn't the time where we beat one another up. I think my grandmother had a saying that you can win people with honey and not with vinegar. And so the way that you kind of encourage people to even be able to do things like that and have dialogue is to not really be combative. You don't have to be combative. We leave all of our sentiments for the protests.
That's awesome.
That's been a big problem of mine. Like I see people that I know personally, and I start firing away at them on social media, blah, blah, blah. I can't do that because nothing I can tell them, and me coming at people that way, it's not going to change their minds and it's not going to change their perspective. People are going to have to search from within to find that.
A great example is I made a great status the other day talking about all of this and why I thought, and I put a lot of thought into the status too. It was actually in a comment of somebody else saying why all this protest is bullshit and how it's really used for everybody to go out and, be quote unquote thugs. And then I put a lot of thought in the stats. It got deleted. So I'm like, okay, they don't even want to care to listen.
Well, and that's okay. You can't force things onto people. They've got to decide in of themselves how they want to respond to this. But again, I just want to encourage those who might look at this and hear this and say, well, you know what? Maybe I do want to pick up that book and see what it says in between the pages, or maybe I do want to look at this and see what it says. I just want to be encouraging of people. That's all.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. This has been really fun. I appreciate you coming on. This is CONVO-19, and I'll see y'all later.
We'll see y'all.
Thank you.
No problem.